persuasive speaking on the winning proposal. It's a 5 to 7 minute speech. Ladies and gentlemen, Tim Monahan.
Uncle Bernie was a bootlegger. This is my grandmother's brother, so it's my mother's uncle. He lived up in Houghton, Michigan, up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, really isolated place. But during Prohibition, between 1919 and 1933, he made his own wine up there and sold it. And what he'd do is he'd buy cases of peaches, and he'd drain the syrup out and use the syrup to make the wine. And my grandmother talks about they got so sick and tired of eating peaches during that time period when he had his bootlegging operation going on. And it's one of those things you look back and you laugh about now that he had this little operation going on. But there was a darker side to the whole Prohibition era. And that was in the big cities, the gangs took over the distribution of alcohol. And this is a time when we had the Al Capones and the murders going on and the corruption of the police departments. And it was only when the FBI stepped in that they were able to get a handle on it. Well, those days are past in terms of the alcohol prohibition. But here we go again and take a look at what's going on down in Mexico. If you've heard the stories of what's going on the Mexican border with the U.S., it is out of control again. The gangs rule the cities. They're better armed. They're so powerful that they've, in some cases, told the police chief, either you resign, you lay off us, or we're going to start killing a police officer every day. And they do it, and the police chief had to step down. They've had to bring the military in down there, that the national military of Mexico is now in these towns trying to keep order. They say that the flow of guns into Mexico from the U.S. is also out of control. There's an estimate I just read, 2,000 weapons a day are flowing from the U.S. into Mexico. 90% of them are assault rifles. The gangs down there are just out of control. And we're telling them, stop sending the drugs here, and they're telling us, until the demand in the U.S. stops, we can't stop. It's an emotional issue when you talk about drugs. I suspect that everybody here in this room knows somebody personally or a family member who has had a life destroyed by substance abuse. It's an emotional issue. But what I'm proposing today is that we've got to take it away from the emotional side and take a rational approach to drugs. And which drugs are we going to make illegal, and which drugs can we accept that there's an acceptable risk to society to legalize some of these drugs. And what I want to take a look at is the Netherlands, because this is a country where they have legalized some drugs. They have taken the approach that there are some drugs that are acceptable as a risk to our society and some drugs that aren't. And in particular, they've said marijuana falls in the category of it's an acceptable risk. And you can buy marijuana in the coffee shops in the Netherlands. It's regulated. You've got to be 18 years old. It's taxed, and it's controlled. Well, one of the first things I think people think about is, well, are more people going to use marijuana if you legalize it? Aren't we just condoning it? Aren't more people going to use it? Aren't we going to make things worse? Here's an interesting statistic. And this statistic is based upon, in the last month, individuals 12 years old or older, how many of them have used marijuana in the last month? In the United States, it's 5.4%. So that's roughly more than 1 out of 20 people over 12 years or older in the U.S. have used marijuana in the last month. In the Netherlands, it's 3%. So about 1 out of 34 have used marijuana in the last month. So roughly half the people in the Netherlands are using marijuana compared to the U.S. where it is legalized. Well, what do we mean when we say, is it an acceptable risk? And I think from my point of view, it's, are people going to get violent when they do it? Are they going to be committing crimes? Are they going to be breaking into houses and burglarizing in order to support their habit? And in fact, there is really no link between use of marijuana and aggressive behavior and violent behavior and criminal activity. To me, that is touched up. And you have to compare that to, well, what's our current solution? Our current solution is arrest people, put them in jail, charge the taxpayers roughly $17,000 a year to house somebody in jail. So because this person is doing marijuana and they're not as productive a member of society as we would like, what we're going to do is we're going to lock them in jail and make sure that they have no value to society or are actually a drain on society. So that's my proposition to you today, is that we need a rational approach to the drug laws in the United States. And where it's appropriate, and we take a look at what's an acceptable risk to society versus what we have currently, and where it's appropriate, let's regulate it, let's tax it, and let's look back on this era of prohibition as a failed experiment.